Hey guys, welcome back to this course. In this topic, we are actually going to understand the concept of box morph in Grasshopper. So as you can see, I have internalized geometry over here, surface over here that I have actually bought in, and I am actually first of all using divide domain square on that surface, and then I'm using a twisted box command on that surface, which will create something like this. You can actually find the twisted box component right here. Under the transform tab, you can actually find it under morph. And after that, I'm actually using this piece of geometry. I'll just turn this on so that you guys can see. I'm using this small piece of geometry right here as a box morphing object. So I'll just zoom in it so that it's clearly visible, and there you go. I'm using this particular piece of geometry, and I'm using this geometry, and I want it to be morphed in on this entire surface. I want this particular piece to be arranged in this exact fashion around the entire surface. I want it to be the skin of this particular surface. So that's why I have divided up into these kinds of twisted boxes, and in each box I can actually control how I place this particular piece of geometry, and you can actually also control how they look and how they actually attach each other, and how many U counts and V counts you want, which means how many boxes you want in the U direction and in the V direction. You can control all of those things. So for now I have just kept it at 25 by 25. So let's go ahead and see how the end result will look in this small script. I'll just turn this on. It might take a little while to come on, so let's just wait. So this is what the box morph will look like. The box morph output will look like. You can actually see that this particular geometry right here, if I turn this on, this piece of geometry has been morphed, and it has been set around the entire piece of skin that I have actually set, this entire piece of VREP that I have actually set for box morphing. So let's go ahead and create something like this, and let's also see how can this thing be parametrically controlled and explored. So I'll just turn everything else off over here, and I'll just click on file and open a new document so that we can actually begin with this script. So the first thing that I want you to bring in over here is that particular surface. So you can just double click and type surface and bring in this surface component. Now in order to use the surface that you had exactly seen in that particular script, you can actually download that particular script from the exercise files that has been provided along with this course. So for now I'll just go back to my script of box morph. You can find this script with the name box morph, which is the third topic that we are taking a look at in this particular chapter. So you can just select this particular surface and just use Ctrl C, and then you go back to your new file from here, click on your new file, and I'll just delete this, and you can just use Ctrl V. And if you do that, you see that if you turn this on, you actually have the surface, and if you have any error like this, you can fix it from here, change this to high quality, and your error will be fixed. So this is exactly the surface that we'll be using our box morph command on. So after you have this surface, let's actually use the divide domain square to divide it up into certain segments. So you can double click and type divide domain square. So you have divide domain square right here. You can find the divide domain square component under your math tab in the domain section. So let's attach this to domain, and let's also attach our U count and our V count. So say I want 30 by 30 U and V count for this, or say I want 25 by 25 U and V counts for this. So I'll just double click and type 25, and I'll copy this number slider using Alt, and I'll put it over here, and I'll just select all of these and I'll align them properly. And you also have to remember, if you want to align certain objects, say all of these things are not aligned properly, if I want to align them, you have to select all of these together, and then you see you have all these things which pop up towards the ends. You can use them to align. So you can just select on this arrow and align them all along over here. So I can just click on here, and you see they're aligned. Now if I want to have equal spaces between, you can just click on this thing over here, and you see you have equal spaces. So you can just make sure that you have that particular widget turned on. If you select all of these and these things do not pop up, you can just go to display and go to canvas widgets and make sure all of the widgets are turned on. This particular widget is actually the align widget that we are using. So now after you are done with this much, let's go ahead and bring the twisted box component in. So you can just double click and type twisted box and have the twisted box component, but I guess I don't see this twisted box component over here. So what we'll do is we'll go to transform, and I guess we'll find the twisted box component under morph. You can find it under morph, and I guess you'll have surface box. Okay, so I made a mistake over there. It's not known as twisted box, it's known as surface box. It creates a twisted box on a surface patch. You can just click it and bring it in over here. You see it asks for 3 inputs, the surface, the domain, and the height. So the surface is basically this surface that you want. The domain is basically this divide domain square input that you have just created, and your height is basically the thickness, which is basically this thickness that you can control. So for now I'll just double click and type 2.000, which means I have a larger range of calibrations possible because I have 3 decimal places, so you can increase and decrease the height just like this and play around with it. So after you are done with this much, now what you can do is you can also copy the object that we are supposed to morph on this particular surface. So let's select the object from over here. You can go back to the original script and you can just select this particular bead-up which you can use to morph. So you can just select this, do a Control C, go back to your original script, do a Control V and bring this in. And this is the object. If I show it, this is the particular object that we are actually looking to use. So let's plug this particular object in all of these boxes. So we'll use the Box Morph component to do that, but first we'll have to create a bounding box around this. So you need to understand the logic of the bounding box first. Why are we creating a bounding box? If you double click and type bounding box and plug this in, and make sure you right click on this center and make sure union box is turned on, which means if you have more than one object, it actually creates a box around all of them together. So in this case we only have one, so that's okay. So now you need to understand the logic. Since we are creating a bounding box, what Box Morph will do is it will take the coordinates, let me zoom in, yeah, so it will take the coordinates of these points and it will map them to each one of these boxes. So it will take the coordinates of all these points and map it over here. Will map it over here, map it over here accordingly, and the geometry inside will get twisted and deformed accordingly. That's what Box Morph does. Now let's go ahead and bring in the Box Morph component. So you can just double click and type Box Morph and bring this component in. You can actually find this component right here under the Transform tab. You can find it under Morph. So it asks for 3 things: geometry, reference and target. Geometry that we actually want to morph is the geometry inside this geometry. So this geometry is located right here, this bead-up. You attach this to geometry. The reference box that you actually want to use to map is this. This is the bounding box, the reference box that we created, which is this. This will go inside the reference, and the target box to which we actually want to morph all of these things are these boxes. These boxes on the surface. So you can use the twisted box inside target. After you plug it in, you might have to wait for a couple of minutes because now the Box Morph component is actually calculating and it's actually creating all the Box Morph elements inside these particular boxes. You see the Grasshopper window has also minimized itself to increase the memory space. It's actually still calculating that how do we place all these Box Morph objects inside around all of these boxes. So we might have to wait a little while till that happens. So now you can see that the Grasshopper window is back and we are actually done with the Box Morph. And now what we can do is we can turn everything else off apart from this skin that we have received. So I'll turn everything else off. I'll select everything and turn it off using the disable preview component, And there you go, you have a nice box morph geometry. You can actually change the size of all of these things by using the U count and the V count, but then you'll have to make sure that you disable box morph before you change all of these things. So what I'll do is I'll directly go to the rendered view in my Rhino viewport, and after doing that I'll also make sure, okay, I guess there's some issue in there, so I'll just stay in the shaded view. But before doing anything else, I'll just make sure that I have a custom preview component. So I'll just double click and type custom preview and bring in the custom preview component, attach a color swatch to it like we were doing in the previous topics, attach this to material, attach this to geometry, turn this off, give it a nice color. Let's say I give it a purple color like this. Click on accept. Now after you're done with this much, you can actually go to your rendered view and find your geometry. So I guess this mishap is happening because, let's just minimize Grasshopper for a second. You can go to rendering and fix this. I guess your ground plane is showing, that's why it's actually disappearing your geometry. So if you turn on the ground plane, you cannot see the geometry because you might have to put it down. So let's say I change it back to automatic, click on show underside, click on OK, but it still does not show me. So I'll just turn off the ground plane for now, and now I can finally see my geometry in my Rhino viewport. If you want to do anything to the sizes of these, you can just go ahead and turn this off. Firstly, go to your shaded view where you cannot see all of these things. Now you can select all of these up to the box morph and disable it firstly. After you disable it, now you can actually turn the twisted box thing on and you can make changes over here. So say I don't want 25 by 25, I want 30 by 30, so I'll just change this to 30, or I'll even change this, let's keep it 25 by 30. So once you're happy with what you have, you see you can actually change it accordingly. You can make many panels, you can make little panels, but make sure that it does not surpass the memory, because more the number of panels, the more the memory it will take, and the more time it will take for the box morph to happen. So I'll just change this to 30, change this to 25, and after everything is done and I'm happy with my shape, I'll just enable all of this. Now it might take a while for this to happen. So after you are done with all of these things, just make sure that you also turn on this particular element. So I have attached this to target now, and I have changed all of these things. So now I'll just turn this off and I'll turn on my custom preview so that I can visualize what I have created. Now this also might take a little while, so you can wait for up to a minute while this happens. And after the box morph thing happens, and now as you can see, we have increased the number of panels, we have changed their sizes accordingly, and we have 23, I guess we have 25 by 30 panels right now. Yes, so the U count is 30 and the V count is 25, and you can also see that the height has been kept at 1.816. You can change that if you want to. So I'll just go ahead and go to the rendered mode, and this is what I see. So if you want to bake this, you can just right click on your geometry and bake it. So after the baking is done, you can just make sure that you move the baked geometry away like this, and then you can finally see what you have created. You can also turn off this preview. You can just do a right click and turn off the render preview over here so that this thing is not visible, because if you turn this off, you see that the render preview does not go away. So you have to right click over here, turn off render, and so that this thing goes away. Now you have your geometry inside Rhino. You can turn on your ground plane and you can have a nice preview of what you have created using your box morph geometry. So this is it for this particular topic. In chapter 5, we'll actually take a look at some real life projects, and we'll actually create some interiors, some exteriors, and some structural elements and some structural models using Grasshopper 3D.